In today's show, I'm looking back at free agency. Most of it's done. And I'll talk about the Eastern Conference teams, who got better and who got worse. Michael Bolton.
Thanks, Josh. It's Michael Bolton here, and it's time for another episode of the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast. Let's get to it.
Let's get to it, indeed.
You are Locked On Fantasy Basketball, your daily fantasy basketball podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Fantasy Basketball Podcast, brought to you by Basketball Monster. My name is Josh Lloyd and I am the lead fantasy analyst at basketballmonster.com. And you can find me on Twitter, as always, at redrock_bball, on TikTok at redrock_bball, and on Instagram at Locked On Fantasy Basketball. Thank you for making Locked On Fantasy Basketball your first listen every day. We are free. We are available on all platforms. So, this is the first show that is going live where I am not here. I am over... Actually, currently the time that this is going live, I'm in the air, heading over to Summer League. Reminder, I will post probably some TikToks and some YouTube shorts without doing full episodes while I'm away. Some of it is vacation, some of it is lack of access to equipment, but you'll get some takes from me on what's happening at Summer League, probably a daily little recap thing that we get going over there. So make sure you are subscribed over on TikTok and on YouTube to the shorts as well. What I'm going to do now, again, this will change. It might change by tomorrow. I doubt it. Or tomorrow, in terms of I'm recording this. Well, again, we love giving date checks here. 3rd of July, it is currently at the moment for you guys in the States. This will come out on the 4th of July. Happy 4th of July to you guys. And I don't think a huge amount of business is going to go down there. So I don't think we're going to get trades or restricted free agent signings. And there's only a couple of those that are important. So we're going to go through, and this is important for fantasy. We're not going to go through every individual player and look at where value lies, because I like to not speculate on that a huge amount, because I like to do it with a mathematical process. And I'm not doing that until most of the stuff is sorted. We've seen Summer League, and I also get back from holiday. And then we'll go through players that have jumped up, and all the draft stuff ramps up mid-July. In August, start of August. Let's do it that way. What we're doing is what teams got better, what teams got worse. I think that's important to know who's coming, who's going, so we can start to get it into our brains. Let it seep in who's where, who's not where. Teams that got better, who could be tanking risks, who's going to be teams that offer opportunities to lesser-known players versus guys that might get squeezed. And as you saw in yesterday's episode, often the players that end up going to better teams, their values can decline. Well, that's the thought process anyway. So, Warnie.
Let's get it on, Gilly.
All right, let's start with the Atlanta Hawks. As I think I said, we're doing just the Eastern Conference. Tomorrow, I will do the Western Conference. We'll start with the Atlanta Hawks. I think they got worse. Not much. And I guess the thing with the Hawks is when I'm just looking at their roster, right, I think their roster is worse than what it was at the end of last season. But a full off-season with Quinn Snyder is a plus. A full off-season without Nate McMillan is a plus. Improved growth from their younger players, a plus. AJ Griffin, Jalen Johnson in particular. A full off-season with Saddiq Bey. As much as I'm not the biggest Saddiq Bey fan, it's important. So when I say worse, the ins and outs on their roster, I think that is a net thing of getting worse. But the improvement, the coaching change, the improvement of the young players, they probably end up better. But the roster is worse. I hope all of that makes sense. So who comes in? Miles Norris, old mate. Two-way guy, he's coming in. Seth Lundy, Mohamed Gay, Kobe Buffkin, the 3 rookies. I don't think that Gay... Oh, man, they've got 2 Gays now. Wow. They've got Gay and Gay. Didn't expect to have 2 Gays on the Hawks. I don't think Mohamed Gay is going to play a role. I don't think that Rudy Gay is going to play a role. I think there is still a chance of a Capella trade coming, and that will really push Okongwu to be the starter. Remember when, at the end of last season, Okongwu played fewer minutes under Quinn than he did under Nate. He was better, but he played fewer minutes. But watch that one. They also brought in Usman Garuba, who I think is actually going to be a really good center, or really good backup center. I think the Okongwu-Garuba pairing in the future, which is the future, is pretty good. And they're bringing in Ty Washington. And I think Ty can be, at very worst, no, not very worst, Can he peak at Tyus Jones? Maybe. Can he be better than that? Maybe. I think he's going to be a good player. And I think that getting Kobe Buffkin and trading for Ty Washington is still an indication to me that one of the guards, DeJounte, Trae Young, is not necessarily an absolute lock long term. They lose Johnny Collins, Aaron Holiday, Trent Forrest, Donovan Williams. The reason that I think that they're worse is losing John Collins. For as much as we can say he struggled and he wasn't worth that contract, he is worse. Their roster is not better with him there. They are now relying upon Sadiq Bey, Jalen Johnson to take those minutes. And Sadiq Bey and Jalen Johnson, at this point, are worse than John Collins. And the guys that came in, Lundy, Gay, Buffkin, Garuba, Washington, they're not going to play large enough roles to make them better. So that's why I say the roster is worse. But I know that you guys are going to disagree, but I hope I hope my reasonings make sense in terms of when we're just looking at the roster. But overall, they might be a better team in terms of record, but it's not because the roster got better. Let's look at the Boston Celtics. Are they better or worse? I am not sure. I'm not sure. I'll talk about that in a second. I'm undecided on that because there is a question mark with some of these guys. They bring in Delano Banton, who was signed today, a 6'9" point guard from Toronto who can't shoot, puts up some okay G League numbers. I'm not really convinced he's an NBA player, but he's someone that is worth having a look at. They bring in O'Shea Brissett, who can be a backup forward, but they are relatively strong up there. They bring in a big move in Kristaps Porzingis. And they bring in Jordan Walsh as a second-round player. Probably doesn't play a huge amount. Porzingis is the big one there. And I think bringing in Porzingis and losing Marcus Smart makes you better. Porzingis is a better offensive player. He's not far behind, if he is even far behind at all as a defensive player. Different types of defensive players. The fit between like a Porzingis and a Rob Williams might be a little bit iffy, but Porzingis has played the 4 at times, and he can clearly shoot. And that rim protection's insane. I think Porzingis makes them better. The reason why I'm not really sure is, again, I don't know. Like they lose. Let's talk about how they lose. Marcus Smart, Mike Muscala, the Italian cock, Danilo Gallinari.
Hands off my cock!
Blake Griffin, although I guess he could be back. JD Davison, who was a two-way guy, who I think's got a little bit of potential, but bringing in Banton is probably an indication they don't love Davison at this point. And the question mark is Grant Williams, because he's still a restricted free agent. We thought that there was no chance he'd come back. It seems to be moving towards maybe they do bring him back, but where does he fit? Rob, Al, Kristaps. So Grant is the 4th power forward / center. So he's probably not going to play. They played Sam Hauser over Grant Williams last season with Sneaky Joe Mazzulla there. So I do think they got better. If they do bring Grant back or they negotiate a sign and trade somewhere, that will push it more towards being better than last year. If they lose Grant for nothing, it probably leaves them about the same. The Porzingis for Smart trade makes the overall roster quality similar. It changes the way that they play. It probably leans marginally towards being better, but it's not a we got Porzingis for nothing sort of situation. Losing Smart does hurt. But if you are able to bring in Porzingis and retain Williams or trade him for something else, I think that makes them better. I think. That's why I'm still undecided on that one. Today's episode is brought to you by BetterHelp. We know that there are decisions in life all the time. You make millions of decisions every day. Millions, maybe not, but thousands of decisions every day. But sometimes those decisions can be really hard. Whether you're dealing with decisions around your career, relationships, or anything else, therapy can help you stay connected to what you really want while you navigate life so that you can move forward with confidence and excitement. Those choices can sometimes be tough and you don't always know the correct path forward. But understanding how you are, how you act, how you behave, what you want, what you need, helps you guide yourself towards the correct answers in those tough decisions. Trusting yourself to make the decisions that align with your values is like anything. The more you practice it, the easier it gets. So if you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, it's convenient, it's flexible, and it's suited to your schedule. And all you do is go in, fill out a brief questionnaire, you get matched with a therapist. And if you don't click with that therapist, which is really key when dealing with therapy, if you don't click, it's not going to work. But BetterHelp will allow you to change your therapy or therapist at no extra charge. So let therapy be your map with BetterHelp. Visit betterhelp.com/LockedOnNBA today to get 10% off your first month. That's betterhelp, HELP.com/LockedOnNBA. Let's look at the Brooklyn Nets. Hopefully. I think the Nets got better. I think they got better. They bring in Noah Clowney, the pimple Derek Whitehead in the draft, Jalen Wilson in the second round, and they signed Dennis Smith Jr. and Lonnie Walker the fourth. And I think that's where they get better. We'll talk about who they lose. Seth Curry, Joe Harris, Yuta Watanabe, Drew Smith, Patty Mills, and maybe David Duke Jr., who was a two-way guy last year. They also lost Drew Smith. I put Drew Smith on that list. Duke is the other one, who I think has flashed a few little things.
Why should I change? He's the one who sucks.
Yeah, that's true. So how did they get better? Well, Watanabe wasn't even in the rotation at the end of the season because they just had too many forwards. They lose Seth Curry and Joe Harris, both older players, who, yes, they're excellent shooters, and the guys they brought in aren't good shooters. That's a problem. But I think getting guard depth, which they did lack a little bit, especially point guard depth. Dennis Smith Jr., one of the best, if not, this might be sacrilegious, he might be the best defensive point guard in the NBA. I know Marcus Smart exists, but Smith's unbelievable. And Lonnie Walker, while I'm not the biggest fan of Lonnie Walker, it's an upgrade, I think, over the way that Joe Harris was playing last season. Much worse shooter, for sure, but he's more athletic, he can move, he can defend a little bit better, or definitely better than Joe Harris. So bringing some guard depth off the bench, I think Smith and Walker, for what they need, is an improvement over Curry and Harris. And yes, Watanabe is not a great option, but I think also not a great loss, because I think he's a good player. But you're bringing in Clowney, if Whitehead hits, that's a huge W. So I think they did get better. I still worry a little bit about this Nets team that was sub 500 after the Durant trade, and for all the hype about Mikal Bridges, and they've got Cam Johnson back. I don't think they're going to be very good. I'm not sure that they're a top 6 team. Maybe they're a play-in team, but other stuff can still happen. Maybe they get involved in this Damian Lillard deal and Tyler Hero comes across. I don't know. Who knows what happens, right? But at the moment, I think they got better. I don't think they're good, but I think they got better. Let's look at the Charlotte Hornets, who I would say undoubtedly got better. I don't know why that transition looked like that. Sorry for that. The Hornets bring in Brandon Miller. They don't bring in, so to speak, Miles Bridges, but he wasn't on the roster last season, so I am going to say that that's an addition. Miles Bridges coming in. For as much as you want to talk about Bridges and the off-court stuff, which is obviously reprehensible, if we're just going to look at this from a, hey, did the franchise get better from a moral perspective, however you want to feel about that, you can have your own thoughts on that. But look, it's undoubted that Bridges returning to this team makes them better. It gives them extra depth, plus the number 2 overall pick, Brandon Miller. Now, I think they're better even with a few free agents pending. So the other guys brought in Brandon Miller, Miles Bridges. The other guys, I don't know. Like Nick Smith Jr., really bad college season. There's potential there still, but you don't expect him to play a huge amount. Although, their backup point guard position consists of nobody. It's Terry Rozier, yes, but he's also their starting shooting guard. So there is a chance for Smith to get minutes over like a James Bouknight, perhaps. There's Amari Bailey who can fit that role as well. They drafted James Nagy. I haven't heard whether he hasn't signed a contract, but I haven't heard whether he is coming over or not, or if he's staying in Europe for another year. And then they've got old mate, one of the greatest names of all time, Leaky Black, who is on a 2-way deal. Black's a really good defender, but terrible offensive player. So the question marks here are, well, Dennis Smith is gone. We just talked about him going to Brooklyn. Svi Mykhailiuk, I don't know whether he'll be back or not, but it's PJ Washington Jr. Now, the fit with PJ is weird because Bridges and Miller, I assume, would start, and then there's Gordon Hayward still on the roster. So is Washington going to be, a 15, 18-minute-a-night player? I don't know. I still think they're better even if PJ doesn't come back, but if he does, they're even better again. And then where the hell does Kelly Oubre fit? Does he come back to this team? We haven't heard any word of any team looking at Kelly Oubre in free agency. He'd probably come back as a backup shooting guard behind Rozier, because as I said, it's Miller, Bridges, Hayward, who are playing the 3 and the 4. So, where does Oubre fit? Both those guys come back, they're significantly better. Even if they both don't come back, I think they've improved just by getting Bridges back on the team from a pure basketball perspective and drafting Brandon Miller. And this is a team that was, they weren't great. They were like a play-in team the last 2 years. Last year, they didn't have Bridges. LaMelo played 25 minutes a game, and they just sucked. And they are definitely going to be better than that. I have very little doubt that they will be better. They also have the restricted free agent rights on Teo Maledon, the Salt Fleek, Theo Maledon. So he was pretty good as well last year. And maybe if they bring him back, he is their backup point guard. So they think they have to be better. Are they still at tank risk for next season? I don't think so. I think they're in mediocre risk and, battling to win 36 games, 38 games. I don't know yet. I'm going to do a win projection show at some point in August. But they probably aren't in as we're going to shut everyone down and let Svi Mihailuk run the show in April the way they were this year. I don't think that's going to be the case. Let's look at the next team, which is your Chicago Bulls, who I think are about the same. One of their big moves was extending Nikola Vucevic. Vucevic?
It's Vucevic. It's big Vucevic.
And he's fine. And as I've always said with these things, $20 million a year for Vuce is totally reasonable. The third year is dumb. This team's direction is dumb. They're going nowhere. And this is my problem, is they're just not doing anything. They've got Lonzo out again for the season. They're not going anywhere. And that's my problem with the Vucevic deal. I don't know who was paying him $20 million in the open market, so it's not like, wow, it's an easy way for us to get assets in a trade. Not sure that's true. Centers are pretty much a dime a dozen, and they're going nowhere. Now, things could change. Maybe there's a trade that goes down with this team. I don't know. Ooh, just talking about the Hawks apparently have made a signing. They have signed Mo Gay. There you go. So that is, and he's not a two-way. So a full-time deal. So that just happened as I'm recording this. So the Bulls, I like the Vooch deal, whatever, right? I've said my piece on it. In terms of the guys they actually brought in, Torrey Craig is one that came in today. So solid. Torrey Craig's a pretty good player. Does he help this team get better? Not really, but he's a pretty good player. Javon Carter, is he a pretty good player? Yes. He replaces what Patrick Beverley was doing the end of last season. Pretty good move. Julian Phillips, can't shoot, wing, traded 2 future seconds to get him. Totally okay, fine, like he's all right, but I'm not sure he's that good. And Adama Sanogo on a two-way. Actually really like getting Adama Sanogo on a two-way deal. I think that's pretty good. They lose Patrick Beverley. They probably, I don't know about Ayo Dosunmu, but with Javon Carter arriving, I don't know, and Kobe White re-signing, I don't know where Dosunmu's role is. I'm not sure that he's back. Javonte Green, I would guess that like Torrey Craig is sort of moving into that position. Same with Derek Jones Jr., so I'm not confident they're going to be back. And Terry Taylor's another one who's gone. So I think that Javon Carter's an upgrade on Dosunmu, but losing Beverly hurts. I think that Torrey Craig's an upgrade on Jones and Green, but they're two players also. And then adding Phillips and Sanogo, that's what I think. They're the same. And that's part of my criticism of the Bulls, is that you're not going anywhere. Nothing's really changing. It could, look, if Dosunmu does return, even though that would be a very crowded backcourt and it doesn't make a ton of sense, their roster probably is marginally better because you're adding Carter over Beverly, Craig instead of Green and Jones, and that's probably a very marginal upgrade. But overall, I think they're the same. I think they're the same. Let's look at a team that I think undoubtedly got better. And that's the Cleveland Cavaliers. Do I love their moves? Again, this is where things are really important in discussing this stuff. Like, is George Niang, who thinks better as a 4, does he help their problem at the 3? Not really. Do I love them re-signing Karis LeVert on $16 million a year? Not really. Do I think Max Strus at 6'4", who can't really handle the ball or defend, does he hold up next to Mitchell and Garland as a starting 3? I don't think so. Right? So all of those individual deals for how this team is, could they have done better or better use of those things? And I'm still not confident that all home runs and is there an overpay on Strus? Probably. But they're better. They bring in Strus. They bring in Yang. They bring in Ty Jerome. They bring in Damian Jones. They drafted Amani Bates, who I'm not sure is going to be on a two-way or not. Probably will be. And Craig Porter Jr., who I think is a pretty good two-way player they brought in. And they lost not much. Danny Green is probably not coming back. Lamar Stevens and Chetty Osman have gone to the Spurs. Robin Lopez has gone to the Bucks. Dylan Windler, don't think he's coming back. Hull Neto, don't think he's coming back. But Strus and Niang are upgrades over Stevens and Osman, very clearly. As much as I might not like how it fits, and it's definitely still not perfect next to Garland and Mitchell. And who do you like? Are you going to close games when Jared Allen can't get it done with Mobley at center? Is Nyang going to be the power forward in that lineup? Is that like perfect? Not really, but it's an upgrade. They're definitely better than where they were last season, and they needed to be. I think they could have been better, like much better than this, but whatever. We're just grading them, saying they are better. There's obviously no tanking risk with this team. The addition of Strus impacts clearly guys like Levert, who you may have thought it was a draftable player, and I think is probably even less so now. But I do think that they got better in this scenario. Let's look at the Detroit Pistons, who I think undoubtedly got better. And much like with Cleveland, I can still criticize a lot of what they did. You're pushing it down, we'll have free agency space next year, and we'll take on guys that don't help us now, and we have this cap space and we don't really use it to a huge benefit. But they still got better. And I don't understand trading up into the first round to draft another point guard just so you can trade for another point guard after you drafted a point guard in 2 years previous. I don't understand any of that. I don't understand what you're doing with the centers. None of it makes sense. But you are still better than what they were, and you'd bloody want to be after you won 17 games. And you bring in a coach who's not the worst coach, second worst coach in the NBA, in Monty Williams, who, let's see, who's Monty Williams going to alienate on this team after alienating two guys in Phoenix? Who's he going to piss off? We'll see. But the additions, Asar Thompson, I don't think he's going to start straight away. But Asar, Cade, Ivy, Boyan, I would do that. I wouldn't start Isaiah Stewart, but they might. So I think they'll probably go Cade, Ivy, Bogdanovic, Stewart, Duran. But Asar's going to play a sizable role. Minimum 25, I would guess. Big W. Malcolm Kazalon, I actually like him as a two-way guy. That's a good move. Joe Harris comes in. He can shoot. Absolutely unbelievable shooter. Can't move anywhere. But this team needs spacing around Cade and around Ivy, so he's going to get some rotation minutes. W. They've still got Alec Burks on that bench, so really good shooters on the bench. Big W. They bring in Monte Morris for nothing, for free. I don't understand it in terms of having Cade, who's a point guard, and Ivy, who's best as a point guard, and Asar, who probably can handle a little bit. He's not a full-time point guard, Asar Thompson.
I think he's talking to you.
But drafting Marcus Sasser to be your shooting defensive point guard and then bringing Monte Morris in. Yes, you're getting something for nothing, and it makes you better. But why? But why did you do any of these things? Still, they are better. They lose, I'm guessing. I don't know where this guy's going yet. They lose Hamidou Diallo.
Stop. Have a time.
Asar Thompson's going to take Diallo's role, but Asar Thompson is like Hamidou Diallo, but like just absolutely pumped full of steroids. And I mean that in a non-illegal sense. He is just Asar Thompson, freak athlete. Hamidou Diallo, freak athlete, who is elite defensively, but Asar's got offensive upside. Asar can pass. Asar maybe can shoot. Asar is a starting caliber player, and that Diallo's role just isn't there. So I don't think he's coming back. Corey Joseph, look, he's gone. So we don't have to have Dwayne Casey prioritizing him. I don't know where Killian... I talked about all those point guys. I didn't even mention Killian Hayes. I don't know where Killian Hayes goes. I know he's still on the roster, but what the hell are they doing with him? RJ Hampton's gone. I guess that Scooter Magruder won't come back. They waived Eugene Omarui, so I don't think he's coming back. And Buddy Boeheim, who they gifted a legacy two-way last season, because that's how this team runs. He's gone. So without doubt, to me, the Pistons are better than they were last season. I think the Indiana Pacers are significantly better. And I would guess that they are in the mix to be a play-in team. Their biggest hole last season was forward. And they drafted Jarris Walker, and while I am not as big of a fan of Jarris Walker as others are...
Hello.
Totally fine. I would have taken Taylor Hendricks, but whatever. But they bring in Jarris Walker, they get Obi Toppin for literally nothing, and that's already a W. And then, to add on to that, they bring in the Shark, Bruce Brown.
Baby shark,
They drafted Ben Shepherd. They brought in Oscar Shebwe? Yeah. Mojave King and Isaiah Wong, who I think are all going to be two-way players. They're your three two-ways, Shebwe, King, and Wong. Solid numbers, solid players. They lose Chris Duarte to the Kings. Okay, he was bad. George Hill, probably gone. O'Shea Brissett goes to the Celtics, no worries, but he added Walker and Toppin, who cares? Kendall Brown was a two-way guy, broke his leg, barely played. He's still got some upside, but can't shoot. James Johnson, do we do it? Is this the end of James Johnson? Should we do it one more time? How proud has he made us over the years? Yes, the memories, they'll be with us forever. James Johnson's probably gone, and Gabe York. How it works with Walker and Toppin, I'd love to see what their idea is and who's going to be their starter. Toppin in 30 minutes a night is a fantasy guy. Remember, he's relatively limited. He can't really defend, but he can be a good scorer, and they are more crowded now. I imagine that Halliburton, Turner, absolutely locked as starters. And then you've got three other spots where you've got the Walker-Toppin discussion at the 4. One of those guys are going to start, one off the bench. And then you've got Heald, Mathurin, Nembhard, Brown. 2 of those 4 are going to start. I would be starting Mathurin and Brown. They might start Heald and Brown. I would be stunned if Bruce Brown does not start for this team. Stunned. I saw someone who was a Pacers fan say, this is our lineup. We're probably or this is my projected lineup. They're going to go Halliburton, Nembhard, Heald, Toppin, Turner. That's crazy to me that you'll bring Bruce Brown and Mathurin off the bench as well as Walker. That's crazy, but they are significantly better. They have a top 10 because you're going to have Jalen Smith out of that top 10, but their 10-man rotation, it doesn't even include TJ McConnell anymore, I don't think. That's good. And this is a team that is more likely to me to push for the top 6 than it is to be in the bottom 3. Are they more likely to be playing than top 6? I don't know. But I'd be pretty shocked if they're not in that mix. Now, this next one is what I know. And what I know at the moment. And I can't do more than that because the Miami Heat are worse at 8:16 p.m. July 3rd. They are worse than they were last season. They bring in Thomas Bryant, Jamari Boyer, Josh Richardson, Drew Smith, and Jaime Jaquez Jr. As I'm recording this, Summer League is going on for the Heat, and Jaquez started off with 3,003 minutes, and then started to play well, and Nikola Jovic looked pretty good. Okay, that's fine. That's who they brought in so far. Bryant, Boyer, Jaquez, Richardson, Drew Smith. They lost Victor Oladipo. Okay, he wasn't going to play, injured, no worries. They lose Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, Cody Zeller. 3 rotation players from the NBA Finals. And they replace them with probably 1 rotation player in Josh Richardson. Josh Richardson on a minimum deal is a great signing. Great signing. He's a very good player. But it doesn't make up for losing Strus, Vincent, Zeller even. Haslam's gone, retired. Omer Yurtseven, I don't think he's coming back, but he hasn't been signed anywhere. They pulled his restricted rights. But I've said worse there with an asterisk because I haven't even mentioned it yet. But we're going to mention it now.
Oi, Damo, give us your lighter.
Yeah, because if they get Damian Lillard, they are going to be better. And if they get Damian Lillard, they will probably be the favorite in the Eastern Conference. Because they don't have tons of assets. They're not going to lose all these good rotation players because they don't have them. Losing draft picks doesn't make you worse this season. They don't. I know Lillard said he wants to go to Miami. He'll only go to Miami. They have probably the worst package they could offer out of any team in the league. Close to it. Yes, Tyler Hero is totally okay. Like, he's a solid enough player. But if that's what it costs, but if you lose Tyler Hero and Caleb Martin and get Lillard, I guess you still are better. But maybe you aren't. They still don't have a 4 at all on this team. Kevin Love's a 5. Jaquez is a 3. A 2. Do they want Jovic to be the starting 5? Maybe that's what's going to happen. But they will undoubtedly be better if Lillard replaces Hero. If Lillard does not replace Hero and they can't get that done, then they are worse. Way worse than they were last season. And their regular season, they struggled to make the playoffs. I know they made the finals, but they, at the moment, are worse with a gigantic asterisk. Hate that word. The Milwaukee Bucks. I was going to say that they were worse, but just prior to recording, they made a signing that I think puts them same. They bring in Jason Gortman and Amari Moore on 2 ways. They draft Andre Jackson Jr. in the second round, who I think they'll groom to be a Javon Carter replacement. Hard to rely on rookies, though, but he's going to be good defensively, I think, immediately. They bring in Chris Livingston, who just won't play. They sign Robin Lopez to be a backup center, who will be the 3rd-string center because Bobby Portis gets the majority of those minutes as backup. And they brought in Malik Beasley on a very cheap contract. They bring Malik Beasley in a very, very cheap contract. So that's why they're the same. Because losing Javon Carter and losing Joe Ingles, 2 rotation players, which is what they were, is a big deal. Yes, they retained Brook Lopez, they retained Chris Middleton, and that is a huge W for them in free agency. While it might not be good in the future, 2 years for Brook Lopez, is in that second year, is he going to be good? I don't know. Is Middleton's knee rooted? Possibly. I don't know. That's going to be a rough contract in 3 years, maybe, because of his knee. But that's not what this is about. Their team, I think, by replacing Carter and Ingles, and yes, Matthews, Dragic, Thanasis, and AJ Green are probably gone as well, but they're not important. Replacing Carter and Ingles with Malik Beasley, and let's say Robin Lopez and Andre Jackson, who I think can be rotation guys. I think that makes them about the same. It's maybe a marginal drop because Andre Jackson's not going to be at Javon Carter's level straight away, but I think it makes them about the same. The New York Knicks. I said better, but I'm also not sure. And I'll tell you why that is. They lose Obi Toppin, and I haven't had the chance to do this. I'm probably going to do it a lot more this season.
I don't want to hear any more about Obi-Wan.
They lose Obi Toppin. They lose Derrick Rose, who didn't play. They lose Dwayne Washington Jr., who didn't play. And they lose Trevor Keels, maybe, who was on a 2-way, then was cut, then was brought back. And I think Trevor Keels still has upside, but, Thibodeau's never going to play him. So they didn't lose much. They lose 1 rotation player in Obi Toppin who played 12 minutes a night. And the guy they brought in, and it's a very uneventful free agency period, they brought in the big ragu, Dante DiVincenzo, who is better, significantly better than Obi Toppin. They also signed Jalen Martin and Jacob Toppin, Obi's brother, to 2-way contracts. All right, they brought them in on 2 ways. And I think Jalen Martin's a player to watch. I think Tibbs will love him for his defensive ability. We'll see. The reason why I'm not sure they got better is that there's too many guards. And losing Toppin, and yes, Julius Randle is playing 1 million minutes and you only got Toppin 12 minutes a night. If Randle gets hurt and he had off-season ankle surgery, who the hell is their forwards? Is RJ Barrett and Josh Hart going to be permanent power forwards? Because their starters are probably Brunson, Barrett, Grimes, Randle, Robinson. Okay? That's their starting group. But that means their bench consists of Emmanuel Quickley, Josh Hart, and Dante DiVincenzo. 3 guards. How do they all play? So while in a vacuum, DiVincenzo is a clear upgrade over Obi Toppin. He's a better player than Obi Toppin. There's the law of diminishing returns? Does he actually play enough to matter? And does the balance of your rotation and the negatives of that mix make it worse? That's why I'm not sure. Clear upgrade, DiVincenzo over Toppin, I think. Clear upgrade. But the positionality means you might have to reduce minutes from Quickly. You might have to reduce minutes of Grimes. You're playing Barrett and Hart out of position at power forward to make the roster make sense. That might not make you better. That's a problem. Let's go to the next bunch of blokes. I think they're better. They have done basically nothing in free agency, but bringing in Jinglin Joe Ingles, bringing in Anthony Black,
Mr. Black,
bringing in Jet Howard, while losing, hold on to your hats for this one, Jay Scrubb, Admiral Schofield, and Michael Carter-Williams. Yeah, that's better. That's easily better. Significantly better. And as much as I didn't like the pick of Jet Howard, or I didn't like the pick of Anthony Black, or I don't really know where Joe Ingles fits, as a pure talent upgrade, it's a clear W. They've still got questions with Fultz, and with Suggs, and with Anthony, and with Harris, and with Howard, and with Black. That's 6 guards. How do they all play? I don't know. Like, Ingles will slide in behind Wagner and get minutes there, and that's cool, but I don't know how everyone plays. So in terms of roster building and roster making sense and draft process, I don't love it, but the roster is clearly better than last season. And they were a team that was basically 500 after the first 6 weeks anyway. They will be, with the Indiana Pacers, in the playoff mix. They have to be. Almost undoubtedly. I'm going to say that the Philadelphia 76ers got worse, and that's without a James Harden trade. Now, I say worse with a asterisk there as well, because they might actually trade Harden away and get something back that makes them better. That is possible. I don't know that. Unlike the Heat, where if I know if they trade for Lillard, they will be better, the Sixers could trade away Harden and be worse. They could trade away Harden and get better. But even if they do, say, keep Harden, I think the team is probably overall worse. Although they've still got some moves they can make. They bring in Patrick Beverley. Pretty big W. All right? He's a solid player, really good defensive guy still. They signed 3 guys to 2-ways who I really like. Ricky Council IV, to Quavion Smith, and as well as Tubalis. I like all of those players on 2-ways. But they lost Jalen McDaniels, who I think is a good player, really good rotation guy. The other problem is that the guy that he was sort of competing with, and if one of those guys stayed and one of them left, it would have been okay. But they lost both Jalen McDaniels and George Niang. So their backup forward situation is, I don't know. Who's their backup forward? They lost Shake Milton as well. And while losing Shake is okay because you bring Pat Beverley in, if they do lose Harden and bring a different type of player back, Shake would have filled a really big role for them. So that could be important. Paul Reed is still out there as a restricted free agent. I think he'll be back. And then there's Montrezl Harrell and Dwayne Dedman, who were on the roster last season, who they haven't brought back yet. That doesn't really matter. But to me, it's still up in the air because the Harden trade might end up with, hey, now we've got some depth forward, or we brought in another star player. Who knows what they do? So that's an asterisk there. But at the moment, I think they're worse. The next 2 teams are undoubtedly worse. The Toronto Raptors got worse. They bring in Grade A Dick. We all love to bring in Grade A Dick. I would have picked somebody else there, but he's got solid size. He's an okay shooter. I'm not really sure what he develops into long term, but whatever. They bring in Jalen McDaniels on a cheap deal. I actually really like that one. I just talked about the Sixers and how that's an L for them losing him. I think it's a W to bring in Jalen in a vacuum. Because, as I said 2 days ago on this team, you're adding another 6'9" forward who comes off the bench, who can be iffy shooting, with Boucher, Achua, Siakam, Anunoby, Barnes, Thad Young, with everyone on this team. They bring in Marquise Noel, the 5'2". He's not, but he's close enough. Guard out of Kansas State. Really good scorer. He's bloody short, man. He's on a 2-way. And they bring in Dennis Schroeder, who is solid enough defensively. But if you're starting him, another player who can't shoot. So are you going to start Schroeder, Barnes, Anunoby, Siakam, Poeltl? No one. The best shooter there is OG Anunoby. No one can shoot again. And Schroeder is fine, but you overpaid him. And that's not really the part of this exercise. But it's an L. The reason it's an L is you lose Fred VanVleet, and the replacements of Schroeder and Dick don't make up for it. VanVleet is really good. He's excellent defensively. He can. I know he had a subpar field goal percentage, but he hits his threes. And given the fact of how this team was, he had to take these shots because no one else could. So they're clearly worse. They've made numerous bad decisions over the last couple of seasons, and I think they are they're ignoring the reality of them being bad. And it's going to lead them into a spot where they're like 11th in the conference, but haven't cashed in on guys. And is Anunoby going to leave? Maybe, probably. Are they going to trade him? I don't know. They are worse. Will Barton is a free agent.
No, he's ready to sack that. Will! Give it off quick!
I think he's cooked. He's not an NBA rotation player anymore. They lose Delano Banton. Jeff Doughton. I thought Doughton showed enough. I would bring him back, but they haven't yet. And then Ron Harper is a question mark as well. And then the last team in the Eastern Conference, the Wizards. There is zero doubt that they got worse as a team. There's also zero doubt that they are in a better position than they were. Not because they accumulated tons of first-round picks, because they didn't. And most of those trades were just like get-off-salary sort of trades. They didn't bring that in. And I'm not ready to anoint them as this great winner of free agency, because I still think that they didn't quite go as hard as I would have liked them to go, because they brought in Jordan Poole and they re-signed Kyle Kuzma. And that's going to make them... Is it going to make them too good to be the worst team in the league? Maybe. But not good enough to be a play-in team. But they are significantly worse. They bring in Jordan Poole, Landry Shamet, Tyus Jones, Bilal Coulibaly, Ryan Rollins, who I think is going to be good, Patrick Baldwin, and the Italian cock Danilo Gallinari. They lose Bradley Beal, Kristaps Porzingis, Monte Morris, Jordan Goodwin, Kendrick Nunn, not signed, don't think it matters, and Taj Gibson, who not signed but probably not coming back. So Beal, Porzingis, Morris, and even Goodwin, all rotation players last year. Poole, Shamet, Jones will definitely be rotation guys. Gallinari, I don't know. Calabali, probably. But they're all worse. The direction is inching towards being positive. Re-signing. If they hadn't have brought back Kuzma, again, I know that you lose him for nothing and they should have traded him last offseason, different front office. But if you had, they would have been worse and they would have been a worse 3 team in the league. And while the draft next year is weak, getting a top 2, top 3 pick, maybe it's Ron Holland, maybe it's Matas, I can't remember his surname, from the Ignite. There's a couple of other guys in that class who I think are okay. And when we talk weak class, I think there's a lot of depth in that class. And it probably goes, I think this draft was probably weak after 45. But the top 40 players were top 25 players in a real draft. Whereas I think this next draft might push out to 55. But there's not like 7, 8 all-NBA, all-star type players. There might be 2 or 3. But if you're bad enough to get one of those guys, like Ronnie Holland, who would actually be a pretty bloody good fit on this team, that's okay. That's good to get those guys. And there's still going to be good players in this draft. It's just very weak in comparison to where, like, there's a player that you could have drafted someone at pick 20, Cam Whitmore, pick 21, Noah Clowney, pick 22, Derek Whitehead in this last draft, and they could easily end up as top 7 players in this draft, like, easily. Whereas next year, if you're picking at that spot, if you're picking at 10, you're doubtful to be a top 10 player, I reckon, in next year's draft. That's the difference. And that's why the Poole things, he's going to shoot a lot. Tyus Jones is going to keep you steady. They don't have, outside of Calabali, they don't have prospects to develop. It's not like we're giving all these prospects great minutes to see what happens. They don't have that. It's not like a Rocket situation with all those young guys. They don't have that. So they're way worse, and their future is looking better, but it could have been better. And that will do it for me today. Don't forget, follow this podcast, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Spotify, and on the Odyssey app. And if you're on YouTube, thumb it up and leave your comments down below. Guys, we are done here. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. See ya.